Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, I can't lie. That it really is kind of upsetting that at the end of the day, it just all comes down to the math. And if you can hear the sound of my voice, you must be in the seats once again. As always, my name is Dave Voigt. I am your host for this podcast. I'm also the editor and publisher over at In the Seats, where you can visit us for all the latest and greatest movie reviews and news at intheseats.ca. And please don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Podomatic, and you can also find us on YouTube for the podcast at the In the Seats YouTube channel. For today's episode, we are actually going to be talking with director Peter Gombos, who is behind the brand new documentary Margin of Error that has aired and is airing on TVO as we speak. And it's about sort of the evolution of political polling in terms of predicting public opinion, and it's just sort of the shakeup that computers and technology and math has really brought to the game. And with the American elections just sort of fresh on everyone's mind, this is a really fascinating piece of work that we got to talk to Peter about, and just in terms of sort of the questions that we all need to sort of be asking going forward with this kind of thing. And I hope you enjoy, because it's a good listen, and I had fun. All right, bye. Hello, Peter.
Hello?
Peter, are you there? Peter, can you hear me?
Join audio. Testing.
Oh, okay, there you go. I can kind of hear you.
Yes, I hear. I couldn't hear you before, but now I can hear you.
And I can hear you crystal clear now. Okay, so that's perfect. All right, well, obviously, thanks for the time, man. I really appreciate this.
Yes, no problem.
Now, I mean, obviously, congratulations.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm hearing my response, and then I hear an echo.
Oh, okay. But you could still hear me fine.
What about now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. No echo on my end.
Okay. Yeah, no, I got rid of the pop-up box, and that was creating the two audio channels.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, I mean, obviously, congratulations on film. And I guess my first question is, like, before we get into the meat of the film, this is something I've always been really kind of curious about, because there's always these shorter documentaries being made for networks and, you know, like across the globe. And I'm always kind of curious sort of the inner workings of how a story would come to you, or would you bring a story to them? Like, how does that whole process work to get something going, like this project going?
Well, there are two ways it kind of happened. Like, I was developing ideas for technology and social impact documentaries.
Okay.
And I was really interested in AI in general, and specifically one instance of how AI is having a social impact on elections and understanding public opinion. You know, all the stuff that has happened in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Yeah.
And then there was this case of Polly, which represented a great kind of case study to enter into the discussion, to look at how something was, how an algorithm was predicting certain outcomes. And I, like you, kind of got frustrated that what I was seeing was celebrations of AI, fear mongering of AI, but a lot of the discussion never went into how it worked.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I wasn't aiming to be a video version of a survey course of first year university survey course of Introduction to Artificial Intelligence.
Right.
But so a case study in real time seemed like, okay, we can break it down. What is it trying to do? How is it doing it? And how does it compare to traditional efforts to predict public opinion?
For sure. And I mean, it's one of those things because, I mean, as I'm watching it, I think, like you said, I mean, there's a bit of fascination to it. There's a bit of energy that's maddening to it because you're boiling it all down to math on one end, but on the same time, they're still acknowledging a human equation. It's such a complex marriage to try to blend together to sort of get these things rolling. And I'm like, once you were sort of embedded in and talking to all these people, like, what are the things that you kind of ultimately learned about this entire process? Because, I mean, as much as I enjoyed watching it and it answered a few questions for me, I also have even more questions after the fact.
Well, join the club. I think one of the hardest things was realizing that it was going to be too difficult to have a comprehensive answer. And I couldn't step in as an expert myself to provide a clear and decisive response to say, this is how it works. It is working perfectly well. The new ways are taking over. The old ways are wrong.
Mm.
Because you can't be an expert of all things, and you have to rely in some ways on the explanation of what is going on in terms of the algorithms. And then I could also talk to other experts who said, I can't believe it. I can hear all this explanation and it doesn't make sense to me because of these reasons. Like, I don't think it, for example, several people would not accept that you could use Twitter as a source of data to predict the general opinion of the population, because people on Twitter are typically younger, more urban, and so on. And that's really the crux of the argument that Kenton White is making about his algorithm. It's like, I am not. Kenton is saying that Polly is not just taking the voice of the majority of Twitter. He's claiming he's found a way to correct it and actually look for the voices that reflect the census, the Canadian census, in individual ridings, so that he won't only so that the opinion he's getting from a riding actually is demographically correct.
Right. Okay. Was Advanced Symbolics sort of game for you to sort of come along for the ride on this as they were working through that election, and you got to see sort of everything unfold step by step?
Well, yes, they were game, but this is the challenge for a documentarian. You can't be in all places at all times. Like,
right.
So we could film what they were doing in real time, and we could show what their predictions were throughout the campaign, rather than show what their predictions were after the fact, because there's a big difference between predicting the outcome before you know it and then predicting the outcome after you know the result and then saying your model got it right.
Right. Now, I love how the film really does manage to sort of focus in tightly on just sort of, because, and I'm trying to figure out the right way to word this, because polling has always been such there's really been a human factor to it. It's an in-person thing. It's asking questions. It's talking. It's that sort of back and forth that we've kind of lost, and we're everything these days, from what shows up in our Netflix queue to life in general, has really been boiled down to the algorithm, quote unquote. And I mean, I'm kind of curious
Right.
from your perspective, like as you're seeing all this, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Or is it just a question of we need to be aware of it and just be making sure that we keep asking questions?
Well, I don't think I want to answer that question entirely. Like, I don't think, I think the point is, number one, Jesse Hirsch says, you know, Canadians are creeped out. I think I am too, and rightly so. Like the customization that algorithms allow us on, what ads we'll see, what movies they'll suggest, and so on. All this customization comes at a cost. I was talking to a friend who said, you know, it freaks you out that you start seeing an ad after you mentioned the word kayak, and
Right.
then all of a sudden you see an ad for a kayak. That you know what's going on, but it doesn't mean that you're happy about that.
Yeah.
So I guess what I was trying to break down, one thing that I was trying to break down in this documentary is that the AI Polly is searching through a massive data source on social media. In this instance, for elections, it's searching through Twitter data.
Yeah.
And Twitter data is itself managed by an algorithm. So it's algorithm upon algorithm. So when we talk about how AIs impact elections or election predictions, there are multiple. One AI is resting on the shoulders of others. So there's no easy way to clear-cut define one from the other.
For sure. No, I get that.
So in terms of what you're asking, it's like, well, is this a good thing or a bad thing? I think
it's a thing.
I think there's another discussion that's to be had, and I only make suggestions about it at the end of the documentary, which is the need for regulation, the need to better understand surveillance, the need to understand relationships of the end user consenting to sharing their data in order to use a social media platform, and not being in any way in any position to understand the incredible number of ways that data can be used.
Yeah.
That's number one. And number two, the way Polly is using that data is Polly is not using the same data that the internal data of Twitter or the internal data of Facebook. That kind of information is shared only within the platform. They allow third parties to look at public information.
Yeah.
Which you should understand as an end user, you are sharing your public information, and it's not just what you do, it's every activity you're doing in your daily life, from your location to your likes to when you're opening a platform, closing it, and so on.
Yeah.
So there's that public aspect, and then there's the stuff that's only owned by the platform. So that's what I was trying to make a distinction also in documentary. You can understand the data that Polly is looking at, and then you have to understand there's much more data that the social media platforms have access to.
For sure. No, absolutely. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, from your perspective as a documentarian, is this the kind of story that ultimately draws you in? Because on one end, people may see this about just as like AI, using AI in terms of predicting an election and doing that kind of thing. But at least from my perspective, this was very much a film about this is what technology is doing and what it can do, and we should probably be a little bit more aware of it.
Yeah, and that, to your point, well, what draws you in? I guess what this documentary is trying to do is add to the discussion the healthy skepticism about what's involved in everyone's use of social media, how social media can be used, and also to put a little bit more meat on the bones in terms of understanding the popular understanding of artificial intelligence, because there are many different kinds of artificial intelligence, and some are more creepy than others.
Yeah.
And this is sort of like just an introductory lesson about one particular application, in particular how this AI is using huge volumes of public data, and that's what makes it possible. All this public data on Twitter, it provides a huge amount of readily crawlable information, which means it's much easier to reach out and get the opinions, the support, the likes, the dislikes of Canadians, the connections of Canadians using social media than it is to get people responding to online surveys or answering phone calls for a questionnaire. People are just not doing that in the way that they did 30, 50 years ago.
For sure. Now, I mean, are stories centered around tech the kind of films that you want to make, or are there specifically, or are there sort of more things out there, more things that you want to work on, more story, like things that you want to shine a light on, kind of thing?
Oh, I think that I have a wide variety of interests. This just provides I'm interested in science and technology and the social impact of those, but I've also been involved in a lot of history docs and adventure docs. So it's like this is just an interesting topic among many.
Is that what it comes down to at the end of the day for you as a filmmaker, finding the right topic that sort of sparks your imagination and you want to get going and sort of look into it more?
Yeah, and I think what you need to do is find a topic that can distill a lot of issues and bring them down into more practical terms. I think that's the very humbling and frustrating part of trying to look at the impact of artificial intelligence, is that it is so wide and diverse that you need to look at a specific case, and even in the specific case of predicting the 2019 Canadian election, there are so many more questions that need to be asked that remain unasked.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's sort of where the magic of the film lies, because it's not making a statement on one end or the other. It's allowing more questions to be asked, and it's allowing the conversation to continue. At the end of the day, once people see this in a couple of weeks, is that the hope? Just that people will pull it in and go, okay, I got to start asking more questions. I've got to be sort of more aware of things like this going forward.
I think so. I think that's what I would like. I think I would help welcome people looking more skeptically at the impact of polls as they're made in real time during a campaign, how that can impact people's opinions or political parties' opinions. I think it's really interesting when we get information on television news. It's important to ask, how did they come to these conclusions? And pollsters have been making announcements on TV news channels for a long time, for decades. And for the most part, we don't really understand how they're doing. We have a basic understanding, but not an understanding of, once polling response rates dropped off in the 1980s, they had to come up with more and more methods to cover the population better.
Yeah.
When response rates dropped off, all of a sudden they had to be more creative mathematically, and that lends itself to projecting based on historical voting patterns and historical turnout rates. And from election to election, the past helps to inform the present, but it doesn't always guarantee that you understand why something is happening now.
Well, for sure. And plus, given the interconnectivity of the world these days, I don't think it's even caught up in the public consciousness yet that these things do change hour by hour. And that's just the nature of our universe now. And we need to be sort of aware of that a bit more.
Yeah, and but that also that's also what makes it interesting to look at social media in general, because
For sure.
A poll is a slice in time when questions are asked to a group. But what the data of social media is constant in real time. So nuanced changes over time can indicate changes in preferences or opinions, and so it lends itself to a level of scrutiny and detail that's just never happened before. So that's also what makes a new method like AI looking at social media so interesting.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. Well, go ahead.
and interesting means both it could reflect changes that we never noticed before, but also that it is scary that this level of monitoring is possible.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are some obvious positive things, but there are some obvious scary things as well. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's a thing, and it's something.
Yeah. So if that's the case, it really screams for a need for the public to feel more protected. And I think I mean, there's been a lot of talk about regulating big tech and regulating social media and ensuring people's right to privacy. And it doesn't seem easily enforceable by a single national government, like the Canadian government when they had the parliamentary committee and Zuckerberg didn't even show up in Canada. So enforcement requires any kind of regulation of tech is going to require, political will, a lot of nation states working together to enforce rules against social media platforms that seem bigger than the nation state right now.
No.
And just new ways of thinking. I mean, I don't really go into great detail, but the law professor Gillian Hatfield brings that up. We need to invent a new way of understanding and guaranteeing privacy when an individual is making an agreement with a huge corporation that they're in no way capable of understanding what they're signing. What they're clicking in agreement to.
But also at the same, like back to your point, I think the real way that kind of starts is through public awareness, and I think this film really is sort of the right step in that direction. And I just want to say thank you again for the time today. I really appreciated this talk.
Thank you very much, David. It was great talking to you.
All right, thanks, man.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.